Dr. Roberto Kaplan und sein Weg der Augenheilkunde. Heute reden wir darüber, wie der Augenoptiker Dr. Pashyia Roberto Kaplan einzigartige Wege gefunden hat, mit Sehproblemen umzugehen und damit vielen Klienten weltweit zu helfen.
Your Bannister Meile, der Selbsthilfe-Podcast für dein Leben in Freiheit. Mit Clara, Lennart und Christian.
Right, hello everybody again to a new episode of Bannister Mile, your Bannister Mile. Today with Pashyia Roberto Kaplan, whom I got to know in Vienna, but who is now living about 30 kilometers from Stuttgart. Hi.
Hi.
And Clara is here, and of course our dear Lennart is today again in
Edinburgh.
Edinburgh, excellent.
Edinburgh.
So we have a nice kind of triangle, stretched triangle between South Germany, Münster, and Scotland. Roberto, I got to know you many years ago. I think it was at least 15, I guess. No,
Could be that long.
Yes, or even more. I think even more, because I think we were still, I remember, didn't you give me some special glasses, which I was wearing, and I think we still had our property on the Wörthersee then, I think.
Okay, yes.
So to the listener, we are very sorry, we all had a bit of a cold, so the audio quality today will be a bit suffering. And then I remember I came to you regarding my eyes, and you did all sorts of very fascinating things, which I still remembered. Do you want to maybe shortly, say a few words about yourself and, about the eyes and generally?
Well, I was born in South Africa, and that affected my seeing a lot because I grew up during the apartheid era, and I lived a lot in nature. I had no television, and I'm a photographic artist. I was taking pictures since I was age 8. So all of these variables gave me a perspective of seeing that I could look into things and behind things. Mm-hmm. So when I did my formal training as an eye doctor, of course, I learned all the normal conventional things and practiced it for a while. But soon I was looking like through the eye of the camera. I was seeing other possibilities than what normal medicine would provide for the eyes. Mm-hmm. And that touched me. And I was in a good position because I then arrived in America. And I was a student first in advanced graduate work in visual science. So I was being groomed as a scientist, as a clinical investigator. Mm-hmm. However, I became more interested in the whole person than just working with eyes. So very soon I realized that seeing is actually about 10% in the eye and 90% behind. So that really spoke to me. Mm-hmm. So the question I had to ask was, what do I need to first study to find out about that 90%? And I found out that I couldn't do it alone in America. I could go so far. So I started traveling around the world and exploring different cultures, African, Tibetan, Indian, Ayurvedic, to put as much together as I could to understand what is the approach that other cultures use in seeing and also for healing. So it then became a physical, brain, spiritual approach. Mm-hmm. And at that point in time, I was still very much trying to prove to science, what it is I was doing. So I was still wearing this very white coat, clinical hat type, professor type person doing research, which I find was good. And one of the things I studied was the iris of the eye to get genetic information about why do certain people develop certain eye conditions.
Okay.
And I also studied in psychology to find out perceptions. What kind of perceptions do people have who are myopic, short-sighted, kurzsichtig? How does a far-sighted person perceive? What is the inner perceptual world the inner consciousness that makes this eye print out this eye condition.
Mm-hmm.
And then I did the same thing for eye diseases. And from that research, which took about 18 years, in around 2006-07, I came up with the concept of the eye code.
Mm-hmm.
And what that meant was that I could study physical, biological information, like the measurement of the diopters in the glasses, or the iris of the eye, or how well do the two eyes cooperate or not cooperate. And those three dimensions is the eye code,
Mm-hmm.
the information that is decoded and interpreted. And that information is how the human being has deviated from their birthright seeing, what I call the source code.
Mm-hmm.
And from that, I developed a therapeutic approach to manage. How do I talk to these people about their eye code? How do I guide them through very systematic awareness training, which it is, to initiate and amplify the internal healing process that's already going on.
Mm-hmm.
So the starting point is to examine the survival perceptions, the belief systems that people carry,
Mm-hmm.
and to dismantle and convert them into healthy ways of perceiving. And we can check that. We've got means of using eye charts and special instruments where they get feedback. When they get the right perception, their eyesight changes.
Okay.
And then what happens is we can lower the diopters. And this means that for the first time in their life, they're going in and getting weaker glasses
Mm-hmm.
systematically. And the diopters in the glasses represent the power lost. Because this is power here, power that was given up in clarity of perception.
Mm-hmm.
So they reclaim this power, and so the diopters in the glasses get peeled away systematically over time. And it's wonderful to watch that, and the excitement as people return to their source code.
Mm-hmm.
And in the same way, people who have difficulties with disease processes, like macular degeneration, cataracts, glaucoma, we use the same principles of perception, because as you mentioned, Louise Hay, every disease process has a perceptual metaphor. It's how they are perceiving themselves inside that energetically just gets imprinted into the eye.
Mm-hmm.
The eye starts behaving according to these survival perceptions. So that's essentially the background and where I am today, pretty much. I mean,
Fascinating.
Talk about it. I love questions. So,
Leonard, I see already questions on your face.
I respond to questions.
No, I'm just really excited to learn more about it. The first question that came to my mind from a critical point of view is, or two questions basically that are quite straightforward and maybe a bit critical. How scientifically backed is it? And the second one is, how long does it take, for instance? If you have, for instance, a very bad eye conditioning over 30 years, maybe 40 years, -8 in, how's the word in English? I've never really talked about
diopters. The diopters.
Yes,
dioptrin.
exactly. Dioptrin, yeah, -8. How fast can you change it? Because, again, talking about Louise Hay, it's all about affirmations and uncoding or decoding your belief systems, and this takes time, from my experience. Those questions maybe.
The time frame question, like in a -8 person, diopter person, is a challenging question, because we don't just work with the -8. That's only one variable of the eye code. We also look at the genetic patterns. We do a very big analysis of the life history in the first 20 years. For example, about research, there's very strong research that myopic individuals who became myopic before age 12 have more childhood stress, emotional stress, than non-myopic counterparts. So the speed, the pace of the success is based on how systematic can they modify those childhood experiences in new perceptions. And that is also driven by the soul, because their source code will only let them move at the speed that they are ready to see. So I've followed people for 15 years. Some people got results not from -8, but I have one person that I recall was -10, and in 3 years was -5. However, we don't base the success on how much reduction there are in diopters. We base that structure. We base the success on function. And function is measured through eyesight. So there is once the training process begins and the awareness kicks in, the functional changes are faster and more significantly speedier than structure. And the diopters is structure. So, for example, I can have a -8 person who, by wearing a -6 as a training tool, can have perfect eyesight. That to them is big improvement. Mm-hmm. And that is scientific. It's measurable. The difficulty is, how do you take 20 people in a controlled study with all the variables and isolate them and prove it? It's virtually impossible. Yeah. However, on my blog, I reported, and I reported this in LinkedIn, Christian, a study that I did many years ago.
Yes.
50 nearsighted people. And after 3 weeks of a very strict control and support process, their eyesight improved significantly. Mm. The diopters did not change significantly. So that's the point, structure, function.
Yes, yes. Well, and isn't it always the issue, I mean, that's always for me the kind of the argument of the so-called school medicine, that they say, oh, you have to do a study and this costs like, 10 or 20 million euros and you have to, so it's for so-called alternative methods, always a bit difficult I find, to go to these clinical studies, because you just need lots of money in order to do this. Yeah?
And yet when we take the topic of myopia, which is a very big theme these days, there's lots of research on what happens to myopic individuals and how their perceptions can change and background reasons other than just physical. Mm-hmm. So I'm busy gathering all that information at the moment for a book that I'm writing.
Cool.
Specifically on myopia, holistic myopia control.
Cool.
Ich habe eine Frage an dich. Ich bin nicht sicher, ob ich das richtig verstanden habe. Hast du gesagt, das hängt auch mit den Kindheitserfahrungen in den ersten 20 Jahren zusammen, wie sich die Augen entwickeln?
12.
In den ersten 12, sagt Christian, okay. Und wie bist du darauf gekommen? Also wie hast du das festgestellt?
I will just translate it, although you understand it, but
I do, yes.
We are also, of course, addressing English-speaking audience. So
wonderful.
So the question from Clara was, if you understood it right, that the first 12 years of your life is really influencing the eyesight, so to say, and how did you find this basically?
Und ich wollte noch fragen, ergänzend, wie genau die 12 Jahre das beeinflussen. Also geht es um viel Medienkonsum oder geht es um wirklich psychische Erfahrungen oder geht es darum, wie sich die Verwandten gekümmert haben oder worum geht es genau?
So and also the further question was, is it about how much you watch television or played computer games, and or is it also about your kind of psychological maybe issues you had or some other whatever traumas or whatever might have happened in your childhood till then?
This is a fabulous question, this concept of, I mentioned 20 years.
20, sorry.
However, the research was before age 12. Mm-hmm. I work in 20-year cycles, And why is that? I worked with a Peruvian researcher, and he found out that there's a very systematic laying down of perceptions during those first 20 years. The next 20 years, those perceptions are revisited. That is, perceptions that are healthy, non-survival, need very little enhancing. But perceptions that are of a survival nature, you have a chance in the next 20-year cycle to revisit them and embellish them with new consciousness and awareness. This means in the first 20 years, perception is made up of 3 distinct parts. Thinking perceptions, I have to understand, I have to work out, I have to build. I have to feel, I have to know. Ich weiß. Ich verstehe, I have to know and I have to understand. The third level, which we understand in English, which in German is more difficult, emotion. Emotion is, oh, that's why at age 6, now I have the wisdom. At 46, I can now realize the wisdom of that perception then. Mm. So I work with these 3 levels of perception. Now what happens is every human being from the iris of the eye is coded with these either 2 or 3 of these perceptions that are visible in the structure of the eye. We look at the photograph of the eye and we say, aha, that's the source code. This person is 40% thinking, 30% feeling, 20% emotion. Nearsighted people typically build up overthinking. It's a survival to steer away from feeling and emotion. That means when someone is emotionally afraid, fear, they may be drawn to excessive television, or they may hide behind the smartphone. Mm-hmm. That's the physical counterpart. Science normally just says, oh yeah, blue light, too much screen, blah, blah. But the research strongly invites us to look at both. Mm-hmm. That's what we do. Mm-hmm. So we literally, for the person's chronological age now, the number of diopters in the measurement and the structure of the iris, we have a direct line to new perceptions for them. Mm-hmm. And we test it right there in the clinic. Yesterday, I worked with a woman who was -7. After an hour of working with her, she was looking through 5.5, and she had perfect eyesight by reprogramming the perceptions, and it stayed.
Wow.
And so we don't have to do 10 years of psychological therapy. We just we just support them with these new perceptions, and then the homework begins. They have to go home because it's not just I have the new perception. They have to find out in their life, how do they apply it? How do they apply it at work, relationships, blood family, sexuality, money, health, spirituality? They have to find a place to land with these new perceptions. And that's the real work. And that's what takes time because of old habits.
Yeah. It's a practical example, and I would be extremely interested what you say to this, because I had quite a strong experience last summer with my eyes. I don't know, you might remember that I didn't have this usual 3D vision, because my eyes were very different. My thing is, I never minded. I mean, I never had the feeling I'm missing something, because I don't think I do. For me, it was kind of that I switched on some other senses, which really served me extremely well. Also in my work with people and so on. Yeah. However, I went actually to a guy for my spine because I had some pain and so on. Yeah. And he looked at me and he said, "Oh, you need to check out your glasses. You know, it's all kind of twisted, and it's how you have your head tilt. You know, when you watch." And because I think his father was an optician, yeah. And so he sent me to a guy. He's up in Ostfriesland, yeah, in Leer. Yeah, he sent me there, and he's a cool guy. I mean, people come from all over the world to him. He's an optician. He's not a doctor, yeah. But basically, to cut it short, probably since whatever, a few months old or a year old, I can't remember, the first time in my life I was really having a 3D vision again. And this was really fascinating. Yeah, I mean, the first time to experience an optical world where I don't have to, you know, my brain doesn't have to calculate the distance, but I can just, I know it basically, you know. And with very interesting kind of, I would say, even philosophical talks, yeah. For example, I mean, you also might remember, I mean, my brain really works well, and I'm very good in very quickly, you know, to get a new situation. Because I always had to do it. For example, when I was going sailing and I had a new sailing boat, yeah, somewhere in the Adriatic Sea with my friends, I mean, you know, they knew where to put the feet. I didn't. Yeah, my brain had to calculate it. And so all over, since I'm very, you know, young child, I had to do this. So in one way it's good. On the other hand, it was fascinating. You know, what change in perspective, as you mentioned before, happened when the first time I was going, wow, there's you know, he had a big kind of, you know, kind of plant a tree in his shop. Yeah. And suddenly I realized that these things were actually hanging, you know, plastically, three-dimensionally in the space. Yeah, and this was for me very fascinating.
What did he do for you? What did he offer you?
He did something very funny. He actually said, "Okay, you know, your eyes are like this." And first of all, he said that my glasses were totally wrong they were wrong adjusted. So also from the you know, from the point where the point is and so on. And then basically what I'm having now in my right eye, I have, I think, wait, how is it? The right eye is the one which has less dioptries, but which has also less seeing power, so to say.
Sehkraft, yeah.
Sehkraft. I'm not sure. I don't. Okay. I would have to remember. But what he did, basically, what's happening on my right eye, I put every day in the morning, I put a contact lens.
Okay.
And this contact lens, it seems to have the effect, because also if I don't wear glasses, yeah, I see 3D.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And then he says, and then we are going to correct basically the corrected eye and the normal eye. We are then correcting with normal glasses. So this was his trick, because he said at the beginning the difference was too big. He couldn't do anything about it. Yeah. And then and when I was there the second time, I said, you know what? I have an idea, and I already ordered some lenses. Let's try. Yeah. And then we were sitting there. Yeah. And he showed me this kind of pictures, you know. And suddenly I said to him, I don't understand. You know, I see two triangles and blah blah blah. And he said, it's not possible. You see 3D. You know. And he was totally, he couldn't believe it. Yeah. And this was very interesting. So I would just be curious, you know, what's your take on that?
Well, it's normal for me. This is the kind of thing that I'm quite familiar with. I have quite a few patients who come in and they have a strabismus, a Schielen. They don't look through one eye. And over time, with the appropriate tools, they learn to switch on.
Exactly.
So the retina of the eye is a switch on, switch off mechanism. It needs to be recharged with light. So we use light stimulation, we use color stimulation. And very soon the brain starts registering, oh, there's something coming through the right eye, something coming through the left eye. And now where it gets really interesting is, from Chinese medicine, we know that the energy through the right eye is of a masculine nature. It's expressive, whereas the left eye energy is more receptive, feminine. So we can look at the iris and we can literally talk to the patient in this situation you just described to turn on a certain perception through the normally non-looking eye.
Fascinating.
They enter into some part of their relationship back with their father or the masculine side of the family, and we can isolate through the regions of the iris what aspect of consciousness is that.
Wow.
You give them that information, then they sit. They process it. They've got an eye chart in front of them, or in your case, the 3-dimension. And then suddenly they get the connection made in the brain.
Wow.
Consciousness supports it, and then they're in their true source code.
Mm-hmm.
Then they have to practice. I give them the practice then to go home.
You know, when you mentioned this now, sorry, just the last thing to this, and I don't want to talk about myself anymore, but it just fascinates me just now. You know that I doing, my opera singing, and I also do my business stuff. Yeah.
Yes.
And the interesting thing is, since I have the 3-dimensional seeing again, so which means that the right eye is also more active again, I just, I'm very much involved in business for the last 1.5 years, yeah, and it's really going well, yeah, and of course I still love to sing and everything, but it doesn't have this totally push anymore which it had before, and I mean this could fit actually to more balanced,
Very much, and if it was your
because
right
my left eye was dominant all my life.
Exactly. So then, from a perceptual perspective, you've stepped into a certain aspect of your manhood consciousness. So therefore, a dream that you've had inside can now be expressed correctly, energetically. So it would make sense from opera to business. So that part of you, for your age, now says, let's refine that consciousness. And so it makes perfect sense to me.
Fascinating.
And of course,
really,
the benefit, of course, is if the eyesight changes, then the person's equally happy. Yeah?
Yes.
It's the life change plus the eye change.
Wow.
Roberto, I have one question. You mentioned in the beginning that this 90% is basically coming from somewhere and 10% is just the eye.
Yes.
Can you explain this a bit?
Of course. So when we talk about the eye and we're talking about vision, most people think, well, we see with the eye. But that's a very far removed truth. The eye is actually 10% of the whole story. And what the eye does is it manages the light coming in. Now, that light has to be converted. First of all, it has to be received, converted, and transported. That is done through the brain. That is, the person's consciousness, which is about 30% of the remaining 90%, decides, do I feel safe? Do I feel ready to receive this light information or not? If they are not ready to receive it, the brain takes over and makes survival decisions. It lets less light in, and it starts interpreting that light in a particular illusionary way. That is, truth is not perceived. You make up your version, you paste your template of truth on what reality is. So, the training that we are talking about here is for each human being to get in touch with that 30%, so that the 60% in the brain doesn't run the show. It's just doing its job to start converting that light, to start providing levels of energy for interpretation by the 30%. And most people are operating under survival perceptions.
Yes.
All of us, we all do it. And our life journey through the life cycle every 20 years is to refine and refine and refine. And the biology of the eyes are constantly speaking and directing us how to do that. But if we're in survival, we don't pay attention, we don't notice. I trust that helps.
Yeah, very much.
Wolltest du noch was fragen, Lennart, oder kann ich eine Frage stellen, die anschließt daran?
Nee, bitte.
Okay. Mich interessiert das. Wir erwarten ein Baby und Ich finde das spannend, ob es irgendwas gibt, wo du sagen würdest, abgesehen natürlich davon, dass man sich um das Baby kümmert und dass es nicht verwahrlost, gibt es irgendwas, was man von Anfang an machen kann, damit die Augen möglichst gut mitarbeiten möchten mit dem Körper, also dass sie ein Beitrag sein möchten?
Okay, I will translate shortly. So as Clara said, we are, how to say this in English? We are
pregnant.
Well, I'm not pregnant, but we are happy to receive a new being in this planet. And the question was that is there something we as parents can do already from the very beginning regarding to the eyes? So something to, basically, well, not counteract, but to kind of watch the things you mentioned in order to support it in a contributing way.
How far is the pregnancy?
It's middle of June. It's coming.
So it's already 7 months.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Okay, let me just be with it. Pregnancy is an amazing opportunity to start communicating with the child. Mm-hmm. Now, the child already has an imprint of father and mother. It's the genetic imprint. Each day, spend time examining the places of uncomfortableness in each of you regarding your perceptual world. Okay. Fears, anxieties, little untruths that you speak to yourself about. And focus also on the good qualities that you feel really good with and direct that energetically to the baby already.
Okay.
So that's on the psychological level. The moment the birth occurs, you've got a 3-year period where there are wonderful developmental activities that can be used, games, to ensure what we call vision development. Mm-hmm. Not eyesight development, vision development. That means, Christian, you'll appreciate this. Vision development is the development between the auditory and the visual channel.
Okay.
Vision development is the beginning of the eye motor coordination. And vision development is the systematic looking through both eyes. So there are some visual mobiles that have black and white lines that can be used after birth.
Wow, okay.
And then there are systematic games. I would invite you to do some. I've not written much about that recently, but there are books on the child development and games that you can play. My partner and I have written a book called Meer Durchblik. In English, it's the energetic eye healing. And that has some very good tips. For example, I don't know about Clara, but Christian, you are carrying a myopic gene code. Mm-hmm. Now that means there's a probability. Oh, both of you. Okay. So there's a probability as parents that there's been a certain genetic transporting of this myopic code. So what I invite you to do systematically is to observe and learn about what I call myopic behavior.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Myopic behavior is constrictive, restrictive, pulling in, fear-based behavior. And systematically start working with that to prevent that code kicking in for the baby. Because the world that the baby's going into, as you well know, the digital world we live in, is highly programmed for the development of myopia. Just by the nature of screens and closed-in world. So, I mean, I'll talk to you more about that in the future.
Yes, I shall.
There's so much that I want to share with you.
Yes.
So rich, Yeah.
Well,
I work a lot with infants and parents and babies.
Okay.
But anyhow, just to as a short note, this doesn't have to be the only your Bannister Mile podcast we do with you. So you're always very welcome.
You mean I can increase my 4 mile?
Yes, of course. Thank you. Well, that's very fascinating.
Mm-hmm. Das heißt, arbeitest du in deiner Praxis auch mit Schwangeren tatsächlich schon, um denen Tipps zu geben?
Circa. My partner is a Heilpraktikerin.
Okay.
And I'm an eye doctor. And so what we do is we combine, our praxis is called Augen und Gesundheit.
Ah, okay.
So it's about everything that we can see in the eye that health, looking at health can help, or eyes looking at health, or looking at the development of eyes and vision. So, so we have a praxis, yes.
Wow.
Fascinating, thank you. Lennart? Sonst hätte ich eine andere Frage, aber mach du mal.
No, please go ahead.
Okay. Also, Clara also went to this guy up in Ostfriesland, and he has this apparatus where you make a photo of your Netzhaut, I think. I mean,
yes, the
everything,
retina.
Yeah. And it was fascinating because when I met Clara quite some years ago from now already, time flies. I said to her, "Where are you from originally?" She said, "What are you talking about?" I mean, like, you can't be more Kölner girl. You can't be more Kölsch than I am. I said, "But you don't look German." She said, "Yeah, but I mean, you can. Our family goes back. I mean, the family name and everything. It goes back for, I mean, Köln, Eifel for I don't know hundreds of years probably. Yeah, and still she does not look German." And for example, she sits, half an hour in the sun, and she has the same kind of tan which I have after the entire summer. Yeah. and then was so fascinating. We made this retina shot, yeah, and the pigments of her retina, they were just brown. I mean, it was like at least I would say 10 nuances darker than mine. So basically, if I interpret it right and also, listen to what you say with the genetic, kind of background, it must have been that, I don't know how many generations back, there must have been some, I don't know, North African via France or what do I know, or someone, no?
Could be.
Irgendein Franzose war in der Familie.
Yeah, some Frenchman there was, no?
It's certainly the case, yes. Yeah.
But I mean, this I find fascinating.
Yeah, I've actually had some opportunity to experience that because I've worked in different countries. And I can also say that the iris of the eye has different colorations across cultures. And even the perceptual structures are different. So it doesn't surprise me that you say that the retina had more pigment. It's quite common.
Very strong, very strong.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Fascinating.
And that's like a melanin. It's the pigmentation that is to manage light. And so under certain conditions, that light has to be managed more and absorbed more. That's one factor.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I have some questions actually. You've mentioned the heavy screen usage and the blue light, basically, and maybe just your perspective on this and how it will develop. Probably it's a massive topic in your practice, but how is this affecting our eyesight? And by this as well, it's obviously affecting our sleep when we are consuming our smartphones during the night,
yes,
or before we go to sleep. But how is this affecting our eyes on a maybe deeper level?
Well, the first thing that just to mention when we're talking about blue light and screens is I have this device that I use myself, since I'm also a computer user, and you can see that it's a yellow filter that I can raise or lower down. Now, on the physical level, what this does is it will block the effect of the blue light. It lowers that blue light energetically reaching the macula. So here's the other answer to your question. So if you use that yellow filter and do nothing else, you're going to probably lower the probability of some form of oxidative change in the macula and retina of the eye. So you're definitely going to help yourself. On the other hand, if you just add one other aspect, like nutrition, and boost the antioxidants and the nutrients needed by the retina and the macula, you've got a second strong effect. The third effect is how much time you devote to that activity. That is, if you follow a pattern of regular breaks, balance it with some sunlight, 5 to 20 minutes twice a day, balance it with some movement activities. Now you've got the third variable to lower the risk.
Wow.
And here comes the most important variable. And this is in line with what I've shared before. When we are in emotional survival, and we can see this with a special light we shine in the eye, it's called a retinoscope. We can see when the human being is blocking light, when the human being is under distress as opposed to eustress. The eye will be burnt more under emotional distress.
Wow.
That means if the human being does not address the emotional factors of their life, they're going to get sick and their eyes are going to break down. And that's the concern now, because, and I love your question, because the medical profession are approaching it primarily blue filters, yellow filters for blue light, and nutrition. Then they say, we'll do surgery and we'll take out the lens if you get a cataract, or we'll give you macular injections. They're not addressing the other factors. That's 60 and 30% factors. So the long term, here's the long-term effect. The World Health Organization has predicted that by 2050, the year 2050, half the world will be myopic.
Wow.
That's, I think, 3 times or 4 times more now than now by the year 2020. So you can see this is, as you've suggested, it's a major opportunity for us to help people. And I appreciate this forum, this discussion, because we need to break that 4-minute mile on this issue. It's very important.
Yes.
The people in the medical profession need to be informed and need to incorporate the deeper, more holistic perspective on this point. So yes, people are going to suffer if they're unconscious. But if we help them wake up, they can avoid the problems.
But basically what you're saying is, I mean, that's very simplified and it's obviously only just one aspect of what you're saying. But basically, if I watch a movie in a very open, receiving and good emotional state, and then someone watches the same movie very dense and you know, and maybe in a downward spiral emotionally, it will have a different effect on the eye.
I would say it a little differently. Do we really know how the movie affects us? What is going on if we watch a movie till 10:30 at night with no yellow filters? The sleep pattern is upset, and the unconscious speaks through dreams and sleep patterns. We don't know the effect of that. On the other hand, if we regulate the melanin function and don't interfere with the sleep pattern, and the person has a healthy attitude, I'm going to face my emotional darkness, I think it's a much better position. So it's not just what's happening in the moment, it's also while we're sleeping in the next day. And the next day.
But isn't it really fascinating when you say that our eyesight is an indicator for our dark sides that we are not willing to face? And I just remember I was working, I found a web agency and we had a major client which was like a massive Augenklinik in Hanover, the biggest one in the northern region. And I just remember it, like they had those massive operation surgery areas in the center of Hanover. And like when we basically are able to heal ourselves, so as far as I'm understanding it, so we have the power to heal our eyesight just by facing our dark sides, and by this eventually not even needing a surgery. Is that correct?
I'm going to say it differently. Number one, I tell my patients, we are not fixing a problem.
Yes.
There's nothing to fix.
That's very important.
And then they say to me, yeah, but you do energetic eye healing. I say, yes, but what is healing? Is healing a cure? Or is healing a dynamic, active process where through your eyes, you observe your behavior and yourself? And when you change that behavior, the eyes print it out in the future. That's healing.
Mm.
Mm. Again, point of view, right? Like to change the point of view. It's really interesting from this.
The perception, the Wahrnehmung.
Yeah.
I love the German word Wahrnehmung because it's like, what truth are you taking in, right?
Mm-hmm.
I love that word. Perception doesn't quite cut it in English.
Yeah.
It's such a beautiful word, Wahrnehmung. So we have to have a certain perception of what we are talking about. Mm-hmm. That we can't try and make it equivalent to medicine and fixing and laser, because that's on the 10%. This is very much the human being we're talking about and their life.
What I find fascinating generally now, in English there's you say in German also the Blickwinkel, but the point of view I even find nicer in English, yeah?
Yes.
I mean, by changing the point of view of one issue you look at or of a situation, you can change a world. And this I find fascinating. This
point of view idea is excellent because this is where I also like the question about the science. Okay, so let's just go to the biology for a moment because it's really interesting. The eye itself and the process of perception, the eye provides two forms for this perception. The light coming in is first focused, and that's to the macula. And the macula is the light that will end up for looking and understanding.
Mm-hmm.
But the retina receives light for feeling, sensing. So the point of view is great if you first want to look and understand, but the Netzhaut fills in, the retina fills in. How do you feel about what you understand? And that's a huge problem with people today. The whole educational model is geared towards look, understand, memorize, and the feeling, the context is lost.
Yes.
And this is another contribution to myopia and astigmatism.
Mm-hmm.
So when you talk about depth perception and three-dimensional vision, it's this coming together of the macula and the retina, the ability to look, right eye father, left eye mother, and to see and feel. What does that say to us in our body, not in our brain?
Yes.
And that's the most beautiful part of the training is people, I engage them, I work on a trampoline, and I work with all kinds of different visual stimuli, and they start recognizing that they see through their body, they see through how they hear, they see through their fingers. They become an artist within themselves.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's beautiful.
It's such a big step from the eye, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
We talk about myopia or astigmatism, but if you go to the perception behind, you've got a whole universal view of the human being and their perceptions.
But I somehow feel that might explain what you just said now, that I never had a problem not seeing like well, so to say. For example, when I put down my glasses, now getting a bit older, I can read a book nicely without glasses, especially with this one contact lens in my eye. But then, of course, further away, it's blurred, But the thing is, I don't care, because I have the feeling I sense things in a different way as well. I mean, I wouldn't mind to see like an eagle, I wouldn't mind that, But it's not that. I know some other people who are really, really disturbed by that. They really suffer, Yes. And for me, it's like, okay, I know what's happening over there, and why it's happening, and I get the energy, so to say,
What you're describing for me is the artist of myopia.
Okay.
In other words, if you look at Renoir, Monet, they were all myopic. And what we appreciate is their, as you say, point of view of how they painted. For example, there's an author, American man by the name of Litsky, who was a very successful businessman from age 15, and at age 23, he started losing his eyesight.
Okay.
He developed a condition called retinitis pigmentosa, and he went blind.
Wow.
And the first thing he said was, my blindness taught me about my inner vision.
Yeah.
Now I really see.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that's exactly what you're saying.
Yes.
You have your myopic version of unclearness. But for you, that could be a talent.
Yes,
it could it could be an artistic skill that has value that you can use in certain ways. For example, I always have a joke. I'll never hire a non-myopic lawyer. Why? Because I want them to handle the details.
Yeah.
I want a myopic accountant. My accountant is -8. I want a myopic accountant.
That's very good.
I want the details handled. Don't mess up. And when I want a PR person, I hire a far-sighted person. Someone that has a far-sighted vision.
But that's very interesting because, my business partner with whom I founded this company now last year, and it was going really well. He's, I don't know if he's far-sighted, but he is very good sight. Yeah. I mean, he's like, he doesn't need glasses or anything. Yeah. And he just hates to do detailed work.
Exactly.
And I love it.
This is the nature of a far-sighted person. They are visionary.
Exactly.
They look ahead. They see things. They can pull perspectives together. But God forbid you ask them to use an Excel sheet.
Yeah. Well, he trained himself, but let's say that the work, how we organize our work, within the company. I'm definitely the one who is doing the operative stuff.
Yes.
Who is doing, the contracts, who is doing the kind of, keynote presentations, who is doing, when it comes to talk to a client, I'm the one who talks 90% or 95%. I mean, that's a idea. I mean, we developed this because we learned that's how it works better. And he then just asked 3 or 4 questions, which are the right questions. You know what I mean?
Perfect.
So it really works well, and it's quite fascinating, And you can bore him to death if you tell him, go and do some operations. And if you tell me do some operations, I get very excited because I love it at the end of the day when a very complex clockwork just works at the end of the day. That's satisfying for me.
Yes.
Doesn't mean I don't have a vision, but But then you are interesting, Leonard, because you are you're kind of a vision producing kind of super turbo machine, and you are short-sighted.
I'm short-sighted. Yeah. I need glasses. Yeah,
but I mean, Leonard shoots out the business ideas and concepts. I mean, it's like scary almost,
Well, there's obviously some balance.
Sorry?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. However, I have as well, actually, my retina is quite broken, but this shouldn't turn up into a coaching session too much. But Yeah, I will contact you anyways later.
Well,
Very,
the thing
very-
is, so what we actually, I think the point that we're talking about here, which is so interesting to me, is that we can change our perception of what eye conditions, how we used to view them as a problem.
Yes.
And by understanding and getting sensitive to the quality of the human being that has an eye condition, starts offering us the possibility of being thankful for the good qualities that that human being has. And this is part of the energetic eye healing process.
Yes. Yes.
They don't see it as a problem.
Yes.
We don't see it as a problem. Then it becomes an opportunity to move forward in one's life, learning from the condition. And this is very, very important.
How many colleagues do you have in Germany? Is it because for me it sounds like a proper niche you're in at the moment. Are there friends?
There are not many. I can count them on one hand, actually. Maybe two fingers. Part of our vision, we have an institute called the I See Life Institute in Urbistenfeld, and that's the training division of our praxis. Part of our mission is to train as many doctors as we can, or opticians in the future, or even we are now training heilpraktikers, we're training body workers, speech therapists. So that's our mission for the future. So, yeah.
Wow.
And how do you talk to conservative, classic, educated eye doctors? I mean, I would be really offended if somebody comes across after 10 years of studying and having worked my ass off, and then there's somebody, well, I mean, this is just 10%. Forget everything you've learned. There's 90%.
Well, you're bringing up a very important point that I have had to master in my 50 years career, and that is to be very humble and very modest in my approach, recognizing that I was trained in that way, and I remember how closed I was in the beginning. So I take it very slowly, and I'm very sensitive. I back it up with research as much as I can, and I just guide them very slowly. I talk in terms of what they're going to understand. Like, it's normal now to have workplace glasses. Arbeitsbrille, yeah? Arbeitsplatzbrille. It's normal now in opticians. It's also normal for a certain group of optometrists or opticians in Germany who are functional optometrists. So I can talk to them about function rather than just the 10% structure, and they understand. And then I wait till they knock on the door, because there's no hurry. They'll come when they're ready. Yeah? I'm not there to persuade them or convince them. It's not my style anymore. But it's a difficult task to open that door of perception.
Yes, yes.
But the internet's helping a lot.
Yeah, I imagine, yes.
Social media is helping a lot to get the word out there.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Like we do on LinkedIn, that
Yes.
connecting with people and meeting like we connected again.
Yes.
And that's lovely, yeah.
And that's certainly a very big, that's the very positive side on this whole social media thing, no?
Yes, it is. It
It's
is.
easy to get in contact and to stay in contact and to link up. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Wow, that's so fascinating. I mean, Leonard, we are, we always try to keep within the hour, so to say, for our listeners. I think you have something burning still now, because we definitely have to have you back if you are willing to come, Roberto.
Anytime.
It would be really, really amazing to deepen maybe certain aspects and so, yeah?
Certainly. I could maybe take the points that I discussed and maybe do a screen share of iris pictures and how I analyze the eye code.
Oh, yes. Oh, this would be amazing, yes.
Oh, yeah. And some of, for example, I'll just mention briefly, since my partner is a heilpraktiker, we now have a software program from Russia that we can analyze through the Tibetan pulse measurement. We can, through heart rate variability, we can measure the stress patterns in the doshas. And we're doing research in correlating that to myopia and other eye conditions.
Fascinating.
She's working with spagyrik and other homeopathic remedies, plant remedies that are specific for eye conditions. So there's a lot more than just what I've talked about, because she has her own world of knowledge that makes it a very nice packet.
Well, this would be fascinating to just, do some other shows on that.
Yeah.
But in any case, I do apologize. In any case, for our listeners out there, we will, of course, as always, link all your information in the show notes.
Thank you.
Everything you want us to link there, please bring it on, send it to me. Like anything, books, your website stuff. I mean, anything you think it's important to have there, so people can then a bit further inquire if they're interested. Yeah?
I'll prepare that and send it to you here.
Yes, great. Good. So, thank you so much. It was absolutely amazing.
I have to thank you for the opportunity.
Well, it was absolutely amazing. And for our listeners out there, as always, please comment, write in, let us know what you thought, give us ideas of what we can do. And we see you next time at yourbannistermile.com. Have a great evening, morning, day, weekend, whenever you listen to us. Thanks and bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Ciao.
Bye.
Bye.